Testing. Okay. Seems reasonable. Continuing where I left off this morning. Hello. I'm reviewing right now every place that this belongs to struct is used, and man, it's a lot of places. One of the things I was going to do this morning for one of the possible solutions to this dependency problem is to mark the parameter as belongs to struct. And that seems like it's not something we want to do. The only reason we wanted to do that was to convey the information about what the struct was, but we could probably do that a different way. Let's just make sure it still functions. Because I did stuff and reverted it and did other stuff and reverted it. We should be to a basic working build again with no changes from this morning. Let's just see how that goes. So, you can do it when we parse it, which is not ideal. But we certainly can. So first of all, this should be redundant. So I don't think we should need to queue it there. Who knows? I've certainly been wrong about a lot of things like this. But maybe not that. Did I really rebuild the debug build? Yes. Okay, so okay. Okay. Since we depend on our struct members, and those members probably use this parameter. Otherwise, why is it a parameter? But they don't strictly need to use it. Or in the case of a polymorphic struct, we want to be able to do messaging about what the types the arguments are, even though the body doesn't get inferred. Okay, so depend. Okay, that should be the simplest solution to our order problem. Hope I don't cause a major deadlock. Adding dependencies is always a little bit scary, which is why I want to get rid of them. Well, this is good. This is quite possibly the first actual progress today. Of course, I only streamed for 2 hours this morning, but go, go, go. So if the tests pass, I'm going to check this in, and then I'm going to redo the, if we ever can resubmit structs via the modification system, then we need to do a dependency there as well. Not dependency, but a dependency. All right, so this is good. Add, I'm checking in the wrong project. Add a struct dependency on okay, that is progress. It is not ingress or postgress, it is progress. How are things going tonight, people? I just kind of vegged all day. Didn't do very much. Went out dancing, had some cookies, watched some live stream gaming on Twitch for a bit. How are things in the luxury lounge? People have been saying stuff. Is that a handmade hero? Handmade hero. What about Congress? Maybe. Maybe. Kerbal Space Program. Start making a new chatbot in Node.js. Oh. There's got to be a better programming language than JavaScript to do that in. Signal multiplexer, yeah. I don't remember which puzzle that is exactly, but it's toward the end, I believe. Okay. Okay, so this is all good. Now I can go back and try to do that thing that I was trying to do about, what even was I trying to do this morning? Well, I have it written down. We were working on overloading. Right, so we want uncompleted usings to be reported on all scopes, and we wait for them. You know, we may get a deadlock if we do this. Because I think, yeah, well, we'll see. We'll see. We may have to change the rules by which we force ourselves to wait on something. Because, okay, right, I hadn't thought this through when I was doing it. Like right now, I think we always stop and don't let you look something up in a data scope if there are uncompleted usings. And the problem with that is that it's very easy, like if you're using a struct declaration just in a data scope, then the struct isn't even going to be able to look up its own identifiers. But that's okay, because earlier on the previous stream, I was thinking about the fact that you don't really need to block all lookups anyway. In fact, things will go much faster if you let people look up variables and you just don't fail if there are uncompleted usings, right? You just say, we didn't find an identifier yet. Oh, but the problem is you can't go up any higher. This hasn't been thought through enough. I'm not sure if I know an answer to this problem. So if you go past where there's an using that hasn't completed and you look up a name, that's incorrect because that name might have been shadowed by something closer. So you can't do that. You can look in the same scope where you are. But like everybody needs to be able to look up in the preload scope. How did this ever work, really? This might be a problem that I don't know how to solve. Yeah, that speed of light analogy, it's totally true. Yeah, I just need to muse about this problem a little bit because I am not sure that, like, this is really fundamental. This is like any language that wants to have out of order compilation like this and also has this using facility, like, how did I convince myself that this was consistent before, is my question. I guess the answer is you can't shadow anything. I don't know. I need to think about this. I'm having a peanut butter chocolate bar while I think about it. This is literally unsolvable at a basic level unless I introduce some kind of language semantic constraint. The problem is as follows. You have a language where you don't have header files and all that stuff, right? So people can declare anything in any order, and you just read it in and compile it. And the compiler just works out what all the identifiers mean as they come up. So far, so good. If you don't have using in the language, then the only place identifiers could come from is declarations that are in the code a priori, or new code that gets added later, right? But you know what the declarations are when you parse the code, right? That's a very simple case. Now, if you add using, then you have a problem. And I guess we just were inconsistent about this before, and it never bit us. Maybe we figured it out, or maybe I figured it out and then forgot what the thing was. So let's say you have some scope, and then you've got a parent scope of that scope with some things that people are going to use, like vector3 or whatever, right? Now I've got a struct with some vector3s, and I've got another struct with some vector3s, right? And I'm going to using both of those structs. They each need to look up the name vector3, but they don't know that the other guy isn't going to add vector3, right? So they can't. You certainly can't wait until the struct is done type checking in order to execute the using, because if you do, you'll deadlock, because both of them will be waiting for all the usings to complete, maybe besides theirs, which is why I said two structs. If you allow a struct to be so dumb it blocks on its own using, then you could do it with one. But they'll all be waiting and looking and saying, oh, usings haven't completed yet, so we can't look up vector 3 because it might get shadowed by whatever using occurs, right? So, of course, well, you know, most structs are just lexically listed, like we list the name and the value. So maybe a using can happen before a struct is type checked. That doesn't work with body text. Maybe you're not allowed to using a body text. I don't know. Or maybe you just let it, I don't know. So I think before we were just letting things in data scopes. We were not forcing data scopes to wait until usings are complete, which means that in that case, those things won't deadlock. That's why we can compile very complicated programs. But it means that if one of those usings shadows something, you'll get an inconsistent compilation result. Should shadowing be disallowed? Maybe. Before I would have said no. But we're moving toward a scheme, and the reason I would have said no is because, you know, if you use a bunch of libraries, they don't know what's in your global namespace, and they could just break, right, if it's an error to shadow. But we're moving to a system where libraries have their own namespace that doesn't inherit from your application's namespace. So maybe. I mean, I do think you maybe want to be able to shadow variables in imperative scopes, because otherwise life is just too much of a pain in the ass. Maybe not, I don't know. People would probably argue about that. Some people are very anti-shadow. But we could say data scopes are not ever allowed to shadow. Then we wouldn't have to do this waiting on usings thing. Or no, we could do the thing where you're allowed to look up identifiers and you just can't fail until all the usings complete. That's one option. Can you define shadowing again? Shadowing is when you have a thing that's named something in a faraway scope, like the global scope, and then you have another thing by the same name in a closer scope to you, and so you use the one in the closer scope. Data scopes should be unambiguous in the strictest sense. Well, the thing is, a struct is a data scope. So that would sort of be saying that a struct can't have any member, the name of which matches anything in a data scope above it, which that seems onerous. That doesn't seem good. Data layout of address operator becomes relative. I don't know what that means. Well, we could say non-struct data scope. So just like global-ish scopes, like the file scope and all that, can't shadow. Does that help anything? I mean, in practical terms, it does, because almost all of these problems that we would have in reality are going to occur in those scopes. But in terms of language semantics, like if you're using two things in a struct, in any nesting of a struct within a struct within a struct, if you use two things, then you have the same issue, sort of. Wait, aren't structs imperative scopes hybrid scopes because of that feature where you write assignments to inherited structures that automatically get put in the initializer? Well, those assignments are not ordered in time. They're just declarative assignments. They're not the same as when you say equals in a sequence of statements. So Go is going to disallow shadowing? Yeah, I'm not sure what to do. Maybe I just decided not to think about this before. Maybe I was just like, look, we're going to build things. We'll worry about it later. It's probably what I thought at the time. It's time to worry about it. It's time to figure it out. If you're not sure, it's probably safer to not allow it for now. Well, the question is exactly what to not allow, right? If I say you can't ever shadow ever, that's going to break a lot of programs. in a way that's probably annoying for people. Like, I don't think you really want no shadowing ever under any circumstances. That's kind of bananas. Although it is more workable here than it is in C++ because you do control your scopes here. But like, even stuff like for loops with implicit naming, now if you can't use names like it in nested scopes, that becomes a giant pain in the ass already. Can I check to see if I even use shadowed variables much? Well, I guarantee there's tons of shadowing in imperative scopes. There is tons of shadowing in imperative scopes. I don't know if I really want to write the meta program that looks for that right now because I'd rather just think about the problem. If I shift into code writing mode, then I won't be thinking about this problem anymore. But we definitely could. We could, it wouldn't be much trouble to write a thing that searches for shadowing. Actually, yeah, it wouldn't. Is it possible in a GC-based language to completely eliminate pauses by simply always reusing objects and never letting anything be a garbage candidate? Well, you would have to make sure that every routine in every library that you ever call doesn't generate any garbage, i.e., you can't use anybody else's code. And you have to I can't believe people make this argument. It's like the point of garbage collection is to remove the burden of memory management. People say, oh, if I just manage my own memory, then the garbage collector doesn't screw me up so bad. It's like, yeah, so why is it there if you're going to manage your own memory? You know what I'm saying? I think C# is inherently unperformant. Put me on that list. Yeah, so here's the thing. Even if you don't generate any garbage, the collector doesn't know that you didn't generate any garbage. Right? So depending on the circumstances, you know, if it's the kind of collector that only GCs when you run out of memory, then it'll never run. But that's not what the collectors are now. Because people want to minimize pauses, then collectors are things that run in little slices once in a while. So the garbage collector is still going to pause and search for garbage that isn't there. You're paying to search for garbage that isn't there that you did all the engineering to avoid creating. You can use GC for most or everything, but also do the object pool thing here and there if GC becomes bottleneck. But you still have a garbage collector that's going to run and make you drop frames. Look, there's a few things not to do in this channel. And one of them is advocate for garbage collection because it's just tiring. Like, people who say GC can run well just haven't been under conditions where they have to produce a high performance enough thing. They all go like, oh, it's totally fast. And like, you never really had to meet real performance goals, okay? I have a 240 hertz gaming monitor that I'm reading this chat on right now, okay? 240 hertz. How many milliseconds is that per frame? 4 point something. All right. How is your garbage collector going to make me not drop frames at 4 point something milliseconds per frame? Recall that the shorter your frame time is, the more the game is working hard to get everything done. It's like filled up the frame time already. There's no time to GC. Depends on your GC, really. Generational GC will only scan the new heap from the GC roots. No, because generational GC has to GC the old heap sometimes. And again, when do you do that? Is it only when you run out of memory? Then you're going to have really big stalls, right? So if it's not only when you run out of memory, then you're paying for it no matter what. John Carmack said it probably can. Yeah, I disagree with him very strongly about that. Very strongly. I mean, he doesn't use his little Lisp language that he threw together at one point. You're not seeing GC does not pause. You're saying some GC algorithms can be very robust against amount of garbage because all the complexity is proportional to survivors or live objects. I'm saying that those are the algorithms that you don't want to use because they have the long pause times. Those are the ones that people are trending away from. That's what I'm saying. It's stupid. I'm going to stop talking about garbage collection. Look. Don't advocate garbage collection in this channel, except for very limited use cases like languages for beginners and languages where speed is not at all an issue, which is not the case in video games. I'm just not going to talk about it anymore. Do I think temporary storage in my language is basically one huge slap in the face to any supposed advantages GC has? It is to most of them. There's a little bit, so heavily GC'd languages that don't allow you to use pointers and stuff also give you memory safety, right? By the time you have memory safety, it's not remotely a fast language anymore. Well, we'll see. You know, Rust is trying to be pretty fast with memory safety, so we'll see how well that actually works. But, you know, even if you want to do a lot of video gamey type of stuff in Rust, you need to go to unsafe code anyway. So that's the thing. Temporary storage doesn't really give you memory safety. But, yeah, I mean, it's basically just like having a generational collector that takes away all the things in the young generation, just like a GC does. So yeah. All right. So I want to go back to actually thinking about this rather than GC again. We've had so many GC rants on this channel. So the using, okay, here, let me type in the example, right? because that'll make it, whoops, that'll make it more clear. So I have A is a struct, right? I'm using A, right? I'm doing this. And vector 3 is defined up in some parent scope. So either A or B, if they execute, could shadow anything, right? Now we know by looking that the names are, you know, we know what the names are. So one thing that we could do is always execute the using before we've type checked anything. Which actually we might be doing that. So I think maybe we execute the using early, in which case none of this is really that big of a deal. There's still an inconsistency about shadowing that we want to do something about, but it won't stop us from building the program. It all depends. So what I'm saying is, if you wait until this is a completely understood type check declaration before you do the using, you'll never get there, because this needs to look up vector 3. This needs to look up vector 3. And this scope is locked on both of these usings completing. So nobody ever gets to look up anything. But maybe I don't even do it that way, right? Or no, I currently don't do it that way because we don't make these scopes wait on usings. What I was doing this morning was to make these scopes wait on usings. Now the question is, once they wait on usings, what does that mean? When does the using run? Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. Well, you know, it's probably will not take very long to go back to where we were, because it was just 3 changes if I consider that. Let me make sure I really checked everything in. Yeah. So this is the thing that removes using from the list when it's done. Now, we have to go to the thing that sets this. Note uncompleted using it was called. Not uncopum. We don't do that. We don't do that. Now there was one other one. It was get scope status when we asserted that we belong to Lambda. Okay. So get scope status. Maybe it wasn't get scope status. I don't really know. It's something that looks at uncompleted usings. It's probably the thing that actually, what's it called? Next reading on. I could just see where it barfs, because we should get an assert. We need to disable the frickin', hold on. I think Ignacio did an update to the crash handler that makes it work with the debugger. Let's see. Nope. So we just don't enable the hash crash handler. All right. Assert belongs to Lambda, scope line 112. That is what I was looking for. Okay. It's called scope imperative. Well, it is block imperative. Okay. Now, it probably won't work, but I don't know what will happen. Oh boy. Just undeclared identifiers by the boatload. Look at all that. Probably because I'm just not letting us look anything up ever. So yeah, 4 things to complete. As we said, we need to let them look up variables. And just not fail. Okay. This thing that we just did says, hey, if you're looking and you ever see usings, then stop. We don't want to do that. We just want to say, We want to let it happen if it's a data scope. So we're going to do something, otherwise we're going to do the imperative scope. And in both cases, we're going to fall through. So this is going to be true. Okay. Okay, instead of returning null, so this is bad because this is, if we're using something and it has an undeclared identifier. Blah. We're going to have to do some things to make this smarter, I think. Yeah, I'm going to want to try to think if there's an alternative way for all of this to happen, because I'm not sure I like this, what I'm typing. But we're just going to see. And yes, I recognize that I had 2 return nulls in a row there. I recognize. Whoa. Hey, that compiled. How's that for a compilation? Bet you didn't think that would work. Bet you didn't think that would work either. Okay. I gotta check just because it's a little too good to be true. Okay, no, it's new. Let's run the tests. Okay. Okay, so this works, but we still have a dicey situation with regard to shadowing. Like, you can get inconsistent results if you shadow with a using, and we don't detect it or make it illegal. So I'm going to write down on the piece of paper, do we make shadowing illegal ? Maybe the answer is just a using can't shadow, right? Maybe other stuff could shadow. that's a possibility, for sure. Thought monads were the accumulation of modifications until you evaluate. Dude, I've read several pages about monads, and as nearly as I can tell, all a monad is type checking. Like, it's an abstraction barrier that enforces a wall between one part of your program and another. That's like the only thing that I can tell that it is. It's like literally almost nothing. It's like what you have in C++ already all the time. My example using an autonomous struct so W and U wouldn't shadow each other. That's correct. So yeah, if we say that a using is not allowed to shadow, and then if we give people the tools that I was going to provide anyway, that help you deal with things, like if you say, okay, use everything, but maybe not this particular name or whatever. Or rename this one thing to this other thing. Then that would be everything you need. All right. So this is pretty good, though. I mean, we have a working, this is what we set out to do this morning when I got blocked up. We have a working program. It puts notes about usings in data scopes. Oh, what happens with thing here? Oh, dudes, I didn't even realize. When we compiled this, that's extra good. This is the first time this program has ever worked, right? Remember this one? Let's bring it up in Emacs. Right? Remember this one? So our problem was that we were not getting all the overloads because we weren't waiting till they were all there, right? So this waiting for the data scope to complete well, that's not exactly why it works. I don't think. because it would find the declaration for one of the overloads anyway, and we just said you're allowed to return. Oh, yeah, we do, but then they get correctly in the overload list later. I'm not sure why this works, actually. I mean, I am. I know why it works, but I don't know why it didn't work then, before. But it works now, so. Yeah, maybe I shouldn't have said literally nothing. Because literally nothing is literally nothing. But let's see what's going on in the luxury lounge. Oh, nothing since 8:30. Hi, Mom. All right. That's better. Maybe the file save imps are to blame for my confusion. No, I don't think so. I think it legitimately wasn't working before, and it legitimately is working now. But I'm not sure why the thing that I did would matter at all. Okay, except that the reason I started doing this was because I thought it would fix the problem. But that was before we came up with the idea that you let it return an overload. Like back when it was just like, look, you're not allowed to look up the name until the using's complete, which we've, as discussed earlier this hour, we realized is not workable. Back when that was the idea, then it made sense that that would fix this, because of course what's going on is we have this main here who's trying to look up do thing of all these kinds. And this was firing with just Foozle 1 using, but not Foozle 2. Okay, so here's the thing. What if we do this? And we delay thing 3 is just going to say load thing 2. So we're just doing everything, right? So main is loading thing 3 and thing 1, and thing 3 is loading thing 2. So we're going to delay the time at which thing 2 gets loaded by a little bit, by one more like compiler cycle, that may make it not work anymore. No, it still works. Dude, I don't know why this works. I do not know. I mean, given that it didn't work before, I don't know why it works now. I am so confused. If it passes, we don't need to know why it works. Well, you know, you laugh, and it is funny, and it is not the right idea for programming in general, but sometimes I do let things slide like that and say I'll deal with it later because it's just such a big project with so much complexity, and my goal is to be reducing complexity all the time so that I'm less confused about why things work, right? And so sometimes I just kick the can down the road and say like, look, this is good enough for now. It's obviously not like shippable out of beta shippable, but like this will get us 0.05% closer to being complete. So that may be my policy on this for right now. Only because though, I'm in the middle of this, I don't want to call it a sprint exactly, but it's a group of work, all centered on library and namespace management. And so like a bunch of things are going to change. And if I rat hole on fixing a thing that's going to change anyway, then that's not that helpful. And if there is a weird problem that's happening and I just don't see it, because, you know, like it looks like things are fixed, but if you don't understand why they're fixed, then sometimes they're not fixed, right? So that could be the case, but it's likely as I continue to work with the library system that if something is wrong with namespacing, I will see it as I mess around with things. So I'm tempted to just not dig into this one for now and keep going. Right. So the thing on our to-do list, so we put uncompleted usings on data scopes. We didn't have to remove any dependencies because they were never there. The thing that we were doing this for was so that usings could actually tell the parent scope to wait. Remember that? I was convinced that I needed to do that, but now we don't seem to. That's what I thought we needed to do to make this work. But apparently we don't. It's so weird. And it's getting to be bedtime for me, so maybe I sleep on it. Right, that's the whole reason, or one of the reasons why I wanted to put mark usings as uncompleted on data scopes was so that we could say, hey, the parent scope ain't done yet because that's the thing we're exporting into. But that doesn't matter because undeclared identifiers in data scopes anyway get looked up again later. Like, right, okay. So we don't, when you look up an identifier in a data scope or in any scope, you know, we start proceeding up the scopes and look up until we get to the top. If that is not found, we actually don't report an undeclared identifier yet because you could add more code, right? A using is one way of adding more code, but the metaprogram could like add another file or whatever, right? So We do not report undeclared identifiers until we've had a pass where no further code was added. At least in the file sense. So when I was thinking that we need to lock the parent scope until the using is complete, I don't think that's true. Or right, it's not even, we don't even, right. So we report undeclared identifiers when there's been no new code added and when we can't make any compilation progress on our current program. So like all the compilation pipes have to stall and we make zero progress before we report undeclared identifiers. If using's resolved, that's progress. So we didn't actually need to lock parent scopes like I was saying. Even though we are planning to modify them. All right. One thing that we do want to do is that I mentioned this morning. I'm not going to try to do it tonight because we're getting close to bedtime, but when we report undeclared identifiers, we're going to want to say, hey, this using isn't done, or maybe even this static if isn't done, because those things cause undeclared identifiers by not being done, right? So we tell people, hey, this using here wasn't done. And then we wanted to improve the overload error message for this thing1, thing2 program. Pointer using. Pointer using is the same as non-pointer using. Because you know the type of the thing, right? What pointer using changes is just the actual data that comes in, but the names that come in are always the same. Someone just subbed. Let me upgrade the luxury or refresh the luxury lounge. Does anyone in the luxury lounge have ideas for like adding channels and stuff? Nobody seems to really use the voice channel, so that's very sad. But, you know, what do you expect? So we sort of just have one channel that's the Elite Subtext Lounge, but we could have more. Maybe one's enough, because the level of conversation is not super dense. Oh, you can't get into the voice channel. Really? It's great. Is it grayed out for everybody? Oh, someone just joined. Maybe it's grayed out because you don't have voice turned on. Let's see what people are saying on the voice chat. Nothing. They're quiet. A games channel. General witness, or Sokoban, or disk games, and compiler language. All right. I have no mic and I must scream. All right. Yeah, well, okay, I feel good about this progress. I mean, it's a vacation weekend, so only doing a little bit is fine. And we've got some concrete things to work on tomorrow. Some small things, some big things. Not many people own a mic. Come on, all gamers own microphones. Who are you kidding, man? Gamers got to play PUBG and talk to each other. Okay, so tomorrow, better error message in this program when trying to call a version of do thing that is not the right overload. Because remember, there's two things wrong. We didn't show the actual declaration, we showed the using. So we want to show both of those things. And then there was probably a little too much verbosity in the actual reports. And that'll get worse because we'll make it more verbose when we're saying, by the way, this was imported by this using. And then we'll want to make undeclared identifiers report uncompleted usings. We'll think about the general issue of under what conditions should shadowing be illegal. I think shadowing by usings being illegal is good enough. I think that is a solid way to do it. Yeah, and then maybe we'll start adding some of the features. So there's some features I've wanted on using for a long time. So maybe those of you who saw this demo a long time ago saw that you can add renamer procs, right? So you could say like import print some proc, right? And some proc is a thing that renames all the entries of print. You can't do that on using for some reason, even though you should be able to. But also, you don't want to have to write a procedure all the time, right? You want to be able to say like using, using Fusel1 except V, right? Except VWX. Because if you have a problem with a name conflicting with something and you don't want it, I don't know, maybe you say except, and maybe you say rename A to B. I don't really know how to, like we could do that and that. Something like that, you know what I'm saying? So you could rename one, and also maybe like prefix GL or whatever, right? So that's a very common thing you want to do to names, is just put something on the front of the names. And actually, if we have all these, maybe we just take out the remapper program, because the remapper program, it's causing me a lot of pain internally to the compiler, and it might be good just to not do it for now. Like, this level of functionality is pretty easy to implement, and you know, and then all of these things would work on all of these things. So, you know, you would be able to do all that there, or also on import. So that's going to be what we're doing soon. Maybe. I don't know. That's it. Let's see who we can raid tonight. It's been a short stream, but Sunday night. Programming. 292. We're like half of the programming tag right now. All right, people in the luxury, frequent flyer, elite, gold, silver, platinum, and palladium lounges can express opinions about who we should raid. Okay, here's programming and, oops, wrong thing. Here's game dev.
Oh my god.
Development. We're half of game development as well. A ray tracer guy was good. I saw him on earlier today, but I don't see him now. Could do Memory of a Broken Dimension again. Could do Haskell Twitchbot. Why the ability to prefix everything in a namespace versus just referring to things as foozle1.thing? Because you might want to do that. I don't know. That's literally the reason. Like sometimes, especially people coming from the C world, they just want that. They just want prefixes. Having more than one using with that syntax wouldn't be kind of hard to read. I don't know what you mean. Why would having more than one using with that syntax be hard to read? Someone says Antone T1 is on now. Oh yeah, we could do this again. All right, good choice. Thanks everybody for coming by. We will pick it up soon.
What does mean uptime?